Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, colleges woo students with bargain tuition rates. An article by Emma Whitford of Inside Higher Ed. Mark and Anika will discuss what is net price and what is a net price calculator. Our bonus content will be part 2 on 10 ways COVID is changing college admissions this year. Our interview will be part 1 of 2 with Dr. Lisa Rouff, 7 mental health challenges that students face and how to deal with it. And there will be no college spotlight this podcast.
Yeah, you can blame the no college spotlight for too much Thanksgiving on my part. Hanging out with family. I said, I can hang out with family now, or I could go prep for the spotlight. I'm like, my listeners will forgive us. We'll just push University of Houston to next week. Sorry, University of Houston.
Hey, very understandable. But, you know, they got bumped for turkey, so that's a good reason to be bumped.
Bump for family.
Bump for family, that's right.
Really just one big announcement to make this week, and that's philanthropy. Philanthropy to colleges is really been impressive this year. Another announcement, Brown University received a $20 million donation that will provide full scholarships to military veterans. And a plan has been put in place to double the military vets in undergraduate, the school announced. It comes from a donation from Joseph P. Healy, who's a U.S. armed veteran and a co-founder of the New York investment company Health Corps. And check this out. Healy is a parent to 2 Brown students. So, wow. You know, the admission office is like, whoo, glad we didn't deny them, you know. But look what else it goes on to say. Healy's mom graduated from the Ivy League school. And I mention that because you want to know one of the reasons why schools are just, especially private schools, why they really want to continue to give alumni a bit of a bump is because of things like this. So this was like the family school. And earlier this year, Smith got a $50 million gift from an anonymous alumna.
Wow.
So they're the alumni again, you know, and that's one reason why schools are reluctant to get rid of, you know, some extra perks and benefits for alumni. So Dave, when you giving $50 million to Princeton, man?
well, you know, the check is in the mail, Dad. I don't think that's going to work. We just have to come up with the other 49,900,000 and some odd thousand, and check won't bounce.
Okay, our admissions tip for the day is, or week 149, request a transcript review. And any idea why I would say that, Dave? Why would you request a transcript? When I say request a transcript review, really what I mean is request a transcript from your school for you to review before you go ahead and submit all your applications off to your school. So any idea why I would say that's a tip?
Make sure there's no surprises, no mistakes, no C's that were supposed to be B's or B's that were supposed to be A's.
Exactly. So there's really 2 reasons for it. One is what you mentioned. There are errors, at least 5% of the time. There are errors, and you'll find them if you look closely. And it reminds me, you know, in Georgia, I shop at this grocery store called Publix. And one of the things Publix has is a promotion, I guess, or feature to their shoppers. If they ever make a mistake on an item, you get it for free.
Oh, good.
So I often don't bag my own stuff because I'm looking like scanning and watching when they go down. And I'll tell you, I get most of the time I get something for free. They make a mistake. And then sometimes it's like $13, $15 item. So I'm like, yeah. So that's the first reason. The other reason is some schools put like their AP scores or their SAT scores on the transcript because there are schools that will count them if they're on the transcript. And so if you have decided not to report your SAT scores or your AP scores, and they show up on the transcript, you just need to know the school is going to know that information. So that's just important information for you to know.
Quick question.
Dave?
Are you able to take those scores off the transcript if the schools don't necessarily require them?
Generally not, because it's usually policy, but that's going to be case by case. That's going to be up to each individual school and whether they, approve that or not. Most of them are concerned that Pandora's box is open. As soon as we do that for you, we got to do it for everybody. Then they hear so-and-so got it taken off. Why wasn't I told about that option? Then your phone's blown up.
Right.
So, yeah.
They often say a transcript is like a tattoo. You wear it for life.
All right, my friend. You guessed your way into the admission vernacular last week. You did a little powers of deduction and got dependency override right.
That's right, Watson. Hit Sherlock again.
All right. Today's word. And by the way, before I say this, every field has their own, vernacular terminology, all that. If you're in the financial world, you're used to terms like SaaS, software as a service, and TAM, total addressable market. And, medical, Dave could have all kinds of shorthand they use there. This is just the admission talk.
Yes. Got it.
Our term for today is application bloat. Application bloat. What's that, Dave?
That's where you're putting all the extracurriculars on the transcript, even the ones that are completely irrelevant, like underwater basket weaving for 2 weeks in the first semester of your 9th year.
2 for 2, 2 weeks in a row. Power deduction, exactly. Application bloat. You're either embellishing your extracurriculars, or you're jamming 12 in, or you're filling up the additional information section, or it says you can have a recommendation. You end up sending 6 in. So it's not a compliment to have application bloat. There's a term that's been around even before I started doing admissions, and I started in the 90s, and that is the thicker the file, the thicker the kid.
Every year there's some story you tell me about some kid who had 30 recommendations or 20 recommendations, including his Boy Scout patrol leader from the 3rd grade or something like that.
We did in the news once with Anika, maybe year 1, about someone that sent in 56. And then they did a survey of a bunch of admission officers, and one school said they had 87 as their record, to which they denied the kid. Yeah. So be sensitive to the reading load of the admission officers. They got a lot to work through there.
That's right. They do know the meaning of the word obsessive compulsive disorder.
Well, there is such a thing as trying too hard.
That's right.
It's like, this guy, he's actually a football player right now for the University of Virginia. I'm not going to mention his name, but he had this crazy crush on Joy in middle school. They went to school together. And I remember one day he called her 13 times, and I almost said his name. I'm not going to say his name, even his first name, because somebody might look up the University of Virginia's roster, but, I'll leave it alone.
Yeah, I know that's sort of scary.
Yeah. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news. What we got today, Dave? Take it away.
All right, article time. Let me flip this page here. It is an article by Emma Whitford of the Inside Higher Education. Colleges woo students with bargain tuition rates. And the subtitle is, "This spring, many colleges announced tuition deals for students in response to the pandemic, and they're seeing it pay off with growing application numbers." So, Mark, I'll just give the quick summary and we'll dive right into it. So it basically says that uncertain enrollments and potentially high summer melt, and I'm sure you'll discuss what summer melt is, have driven colleges to announce a variety of tuition discounts and scholarship programs to entice prospective students and to keep them from going off the cliff in terms of applications and in terms of student enrollment. So we'll just talk briefly about the University of Nebraska. It announced what it called its Nebraska Promise Program April 1st, and that waives tuition and fees for Nebraska students who are either Pell Grant recipients or whose family make less than $60,000 a year. And they found that this resulted in an additional 1,000 students. Now, to be clear, that's just tuition. The students still have to pay room and board, but they also announced a 2-year tuition freeze. And in the words of their president, Ted Carter, without this program, they would have faced at least a 10 to 15% enrollment drop, and he feared that would have taken the school over 10 years to recover. But because of this, applications were down 5.4% before the program, but now they're up over 16%, which translates into 1,900 applications more since. So we'll stop there, Mark, and let's discuss why they're doing it, what the impact of COVID has been, and what this concept of summer melt is.
Yeah, great intro, Dave. So this is a change in college admissions. You know, in the past, the prevailing mindset was high sticker price, high discount model. High tuition, high discount model was the best and the most effective way to reel kids in. And it kind of makes sense. So I'm going to give a quick story. Dave's going to wonder where I'm going with this, but hopefully I will land the plane and it'll make sense.
Okay.
So one difference between Dave and I is he's Mr. Fixer-Upper. When he's back in Chicago, he's doing bathrooms and putting flooring and doing all kind of, he may as well be a general contractor to me. He's Mr. Fixer-Upper, and I'm allergic to all that stuff. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. So what he does saves a lot of money. I've always got people over at the house paying. I had 4 people at the house the other day working on the house, and I had to pay them all. So it's better to be you than me. But so I had this guy over the other day, and he's like hanging these pictures around the house. And then we've got this mirror, and he's like, my goodness, this mirror must weigh 50 pounds. You must have paid at least $300 for it. And actually what happened was we were shopping when we first moved here, and we went into this JCPenney outlet, and the mirror said $549, and it had a line through it, and it was $59. And so wow. I'm like, I wasn't even thinking about getting a mirror, but I'm like, $59, look at that. You know, it's really nice. It's got the natural wood look. And so I bought it. And so that's the way schools have functioned. You know, we'll say we're $70,000 and we'll give you a $20,000 scholarship. You're going to feel fantastic about it. And you're going to feel we helped your pocketbook. We conferred prestige on you because, of course, they don't just say you got 20. They sometimes put in a nice $10 to $15 package with ribbons, and you might even get a call from somebody high up about this amazing scholarship you got. And that's been proven as a very effective way of enrolling kids and getting them in. But since the pandemic, people have found that people are getting scared away by that sticker price, and they're just saying, no, can't do it. So what they're realizing is we need to shift our whole entire model and go to a different model, which is a lower price that doesn't intimidate people. And it will generate a lot more applications. And so I'll talk in a second about it's not just Nebraska. They've mentioned Nebraska, and by the way, they also did 2-year freeze on tuition. And right. I'll mention a bunch of other schools as well that are having success with this model. But before we do, summer melt, and I remember doing this with Anika, summer melt, I said, think about a popsicle in the heat. It just right. goes away. And summer melt are students that had enrolled, deposited, signed, paid the deposit, picked the dorm room up, and they just go away like a popsicle in the summer. They do not show up in the fall. And summer melt for some schools is over 30%.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, there are lots and lots of reasons for that. And reasons why we've done a few episodes before you started, Dave, done a few episodes with Anika on why some schools have such high summer melt rates and what can be done about it. But that's summer melt, and that's what's going on here.
So let me ask you a question. Knowing then that, a lot of kids used to respond to the 50% off, act now, it used to be 20, now it's 10. Why particularly are they responding to the schools being straight up and saying, hey, look, we're just going to give you the bargain basement price right up front, or freeze tuition, or make this stuff free? What are the factors that you think have changed?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked that, because the downside with the other model, high tuition, high discount model, yeah, it's great when you get a scholarship and you end up paying significantly less than sticker price. But there was always a downside to that model. And that downside is price intimidation. Right. I can't tell you how many people say to me, that school's $75,000. I'm not looking at that. And I have to come back to them and say, it's not what they list, it's what you pay. And this bleeds perfectly into my conversation I'm going to have with Anika after this, where we talk about net price. But I'll get more into that in that conversation with her. So the downside always with that, Dave, is do you even get people on campus? It's like fishing. It's like fishing. Can you even get the fish on the line to even reel them in? Right. Or can the fish see, a long ways away? No, that's a trap. That's a hook. I'm not going near that. So that's the downside with that, is price intimidation can be a deterrent to applying. And this has always been true. That's not like it's a new phenomena. But now in the age of COVID, where people are feeling it substantially in their pocketbook, they're just looking at that and saying, no way, I'm not even going to attempt to try to go down that path, because I know I don't have that kind of cheese in my pocket. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I compare it to buying a car. I think going into a dealer is extremely intimidating. And then you see the list price of that new Lincoln Navigator is over $100,000. And you'd rather just go down the street to CarMax, where you can pick one up 2 years old for $20. So, and you don't have to go through the hassle of negotiating for the next 3 hours to get it within the realm of what you can afford. So, yeah, I think it's CarMax pricing.
I mean, there's some truth to that. It's a decent parallel. I would go even one step further and say it's sort of imbued throughout the culture that when it comes to cars, you can haggle unless you're going to a no haggle place. That's just part of the culture. People don't necessarily know that the sticker price is not necessarily what you pay. That's not true. That's not as sort of ubiquitous. Yeah. And so price intimidation is even more real when it comes to looking at costs.
That's right. And I think the big thing with cars is there's so many internet services now where you can go onto Car Gurus and they're giving you the price comparisons. It's a lot harder to go on the internet and compare one college to the other, because there's a state school, there's a private school, it's from this region, it's from that region. So it's a lot harder to compare the apples to oranges with the colleges as opposed to cars.
Yeah. And even if it's the same region and if it's the same private school, I mean, we've talked about this before, particularly when we talked about the CSS profile, they can have completely different models in terms of how they disperse their aid. Right. It can be all over the place in terms of how they calculate what you can contribute, to the cost of college. So it's virtually impossible to compare that way. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit with Anika about net price calculators, and I'm having an interview coming up early part of 2021. We're going to go deeper into net price calculators, but yeah, so there's a difference there. But let's go on and also talk a little bit about some other schools, Dave, and it mentions in the article as well. You want to comment on any of them?
Sure. The next one they talk about is Albion College. That's a small liberal arts college in Michigan, and they called it the Michigan 2020 Promise. And it covers tuition and fees for all in-state students who make less than $65,000 a year. And they have additional scholarships available for those families that make between $65,000 and $92,000 a year. And they estimate that because of that program, now keep in mind it's a much smaller school than University of Nebraska, but they got 250 more applications, and they estimate that'll translate into 50 or more students enrolling.
Yeah, and this is an interesting quote here talking about their program. I'll read it directly from the article. This comes from Albion's president, Maury Ditzler. He says, "This program is for students who are thinking of going to the East or West Coast." Remember, Albion's in Michigan, Midwest school.
Right.
And they've decided they want to stay closer to home. It's for students who are thinking of going to an institution with 40,000 students and decide they would be more comfortable in a rural community and a college of 15,000 students. So you can see who they're targeting.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're also students are saving on the travel. They're closer to home. And in a time of COVID, I mean, that's probably a significant consideration now as well.
Yeah. And then the article mentions many, many other schools. It talks about Ohio Wesleyan. They canceled their 3% tuition increase.
And Thomas University in Georgia, which had a 30% tuition discount to those. That was very, very interesting to those, specifically those who lost their jobs, or the families lost their jobs. Am I getting that right, Mark?
Yeah. And then another quote comes from the former provost at the University of San Francisco, Don Heller. Yeah. He says this is the first time he's seen so many colleges enacting so many tuition deal programs in his lifetime. Yeah. And so it's a response to the pandemic. And some schools are getting creative too in terms of what they're doing. Coming up with really creative programs. One is the University of Maine. They've got a special tuition discount program that they implemented earlier this spring. And they said it's not just going to be for this year, it's going to be moving forward. And they're offering in-state tuition to any student whose college closed as a result of the pandemic. So targeting schools that closed, and now this puts a lot of pressure on schools that closed, Dave.
Yeah, how many schools did close? They mentioned one or two, but I was actually going to follow that up with you. Have you seen a lot of closures due to the pandemic so far?
Not closures as in we're done, not a lot of them. You've seen a lot more, downsizing than you've seen closures, and mergers than closures. A lot more mergers and downsizing than actual closures. But I think that's a creative approach. And I'll tell you what, it puts pressure on people if they're thinking of just going completely online and they don't want to go online. And you got a school over there saying, we're going to target, we'll target you and give you in-state tuition. Now, I don't necessarily know if they'll apply that to a school that just is going online, because in the article it says closed as opposed to online. But it's interesting. So, you're seeing the impact of COVID on the budgets of these schools. And there's no doubt in my mind, this is a trend that we'll expect to continue for a long time.
I think so.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Anika, how was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was so nice. NGA. Weather's so awesome. And I heard it's snowing. Jalen just calls and says, it's snowing down here. Is it true?
It is?
Yeah, he's in North Atlanta. Well, I guess it's North Atlanta.
Emory? I don't consider Emory North Atlanta.
Yeah, what is that?
That's Atlanta.
Yeah.
North Atlanta. It was freezing today.
I'm so used to South Fulton. I'm calling everything north of South Fulton.
No, that is not North Atlanta. It was really cold today, the coldest day of the year, but I didn't see any snow.
He saw some snow, or he was sleepy.
Snow.
Yeah, but we were there. The weather was awesome. It was great. Good. Yeah, how was yours?
Good. It was fantastic. Is having the girls back. Kara's cooked her feast.
No.
Had everybody back. And Joy had a friend from UGA that's at London, England. And we did, we were good at social distancing. I was not playing around with it. Mm-hmm. Like even when we ate 6 feet apart, and I tried to keep the mask on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it was just still nice being with family.
Mm-hmm.
Just nice being with family.
Awesome.
Well, you remembered last week, Anika, I started a new top 10 countdown.
Oh, that's right.
Twitter followers.
Who was number 1 or number 10? Ariana?
No, Ariana Grande was 78.7 million Twitter followers. Number 9 with 79.5 million Twitter followers, Ellen DeGeneres.
Oh, okay, Ellen.
Talk show host. So There we go.
There we go.
You know, I'm not asking you to guess on this one. That'll be hard. Maybe we can get down to the top 3.
Don't even think about it.
Okay. Okay, friends. We are in chapter 149 of a book I wrote called 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And the book has 171 chapters. They're all about 2 to 5 pages. This chapter is called What is Net Price and What is a Net Price Calculator? Anika, you read the chapter. What were your takeaways?
So question number 1, what is net price? Net price is what you pay out of your pockets. Literally what you have to pay.
Exactly.
And then the net price calculator is a tool.
Let me stop you there.
Okay.
So what is the opposite, would you say, of net price?
Oh, sticker price.
Sticker price. And sticker price is what?
What they say everything is valued at.
Yeah. So when you go on and you list when you go on to a college, if you look up the cost, that'll be sticker price.
Yeah.
You know, now not sometimes they don't have everything included, but if they're in the spirit of full disclosure, everything will be listed under sticker price.
Okay.
So, yep. So that's the bottom line. Is another way of looking at it is full cost of attendance, every penny, minus free money, minus grants and scholarships. Okay. That's net price.
Got it.
All right.
All right. And then the calculator is the tool that'll let you know what your net price is going to be.
Yeah. So this is something that is a requirement that went into place in the fall of 2011 under the Obama administration, and Arnie Duncan was Secretary of Education, that every college has to have a net price calculator, because literally this is how crazy college is. People are applying to schools without knowing the cost, you know, and that's really messed up because, you know, the colleges hook you in when you visit, and the tour guide is nice, and admission officers follow up with you, and you get all this mail, and they're sending you all this stuff. So they're wooing you and pulling you in emotionally, but you have no idea what the cost is. Like, that's just not how you do any other thing in life. When you buy a house, you know what the cost is. And you buy a car, you know what the cost is. You know, and I just mentioned those because those tend to be some of the bigger ticket items. You name whatever it is. You go on book an airline ticket, book a vacation, you know, everything else, you know what the cost is. But prior to this, people were going all the way through it's like someone walking you all the way down to the altar. And then at the altar, you find out all the cost of the wedding. Oh, this will be $73,000, and you faint, you know? So that's a massive problem. So it became a requirement. Every college has to have this net price calculator on the website. What else did you take away from the chapter, Nick?
Well, it's that. And I know that not everybody does it the same way.
Yeah. So here's a quote. I'll read it to you from the chapter. It says, "It is great that the cost calculator." Oh, by the way, sometimes they're called cost calculators. So that's just, you see the term cost calculators, net price calculator. It's the exact same thing. So here I use the term cost calculator. "It is great that the cost calculators are required, but unfortunately, the Department of Education gave colleges very minimalistic requirements as to what the calculator needs to include. And there are a lot of bad calculators out there." In an excellent article from January 26, 2016, by your college concierge titled, What is a net cost calculator and how good are the calculators on the web, it talks about the deficiencies of the calculators. So it's way better than it used to be, but it still has issues because, you know, so now in an ideal world, if these calculators were precise, and if they were all precise, then you would have solved the problem in the past. So you can go through, complete the net price calculator, and then decide even from there, is this a school you even want to pursue? So what should be done about that? Do you think that should people not do them because they don't know if they're accurate? Should everybody do them? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I mean, because the bottom line is that it's still just an estimate. It's not a guarantee. It is not like, okay, this is what I'm going to pay. You're not going to go through that exercise and say, okay, this is literally what I'm going to pay if I go to this school. They're still estimates. So how much you need to underscore that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna involve all of our listeners in a project. I've never done this before. I did this one time, actually, just for our financial supporters of the show. I sent an email out and said, I want you guys to be involved in shaping my next interview. So please send in questions for me to ask. But I've never done it broad-based to everybody, so I'm doing it now. I have an interview coming up in 2021, first half of 2021. It's with Michael Runowitz, and if that name sounds familiar, he's the Director of Financial Aid at Washington University in St. Louis. And he was on our podcast over 2 years ago. I interviewed him on the 16 most common mistakes people make on the FAFSA, which, by the way, that's a great interview for you to go back and listen to if you haven't heard that one. And so I reached out to him again because we've gotten together a couple of times socially, and I just really, really like him a lot. He's a fantastic guy and knows his stuff, and he really cares about kids. And I reached out to him in early part of November. I said, "Hey, Michael, it's been a couple of years since you're on the show. Can we have you back on the podcast? Because I want to interview you about net price calculators." And so I'm asking all of our listeners to send your questions in that you want me to ask Michael Runowitz about net price calculators, because I'm going to ask him the really, really hard questions.
Okay.
Because there's some really hard questions that you can ask. It's not going to be a softball interview. Sorry, Michael. Hope you're not listening. So you don't cancel on me.
But wait,
Sorry.
Mark. But for somebody that's not familiar at all with, because I've never done one of those. I don't think we ever had to do. Well, I shouldn't say we've never had to do it. I just never done it. But for someone that is totally unfamiliar with the calculator, what's an example of a question to ask? Like, how do we know what to ask?
What are some common mistakes? I don't want to tell everybody what to ask, but maybe let me go into them a little bit more, and maybe that'll generate some questions.
Okay.
So some of them are really short and quick, and they don't ask you very many questions at all. Others, are going to take you about 20 minutes to complete, and you're going to need to have your tax returns prior year. So, for example, if we were talking about, let's just say if it's the rising senior class, they're going to start in 2021. They would need their 2019 tax returns. If it's a junior class, 2020 tax returns. You're going to need your tax returns. You're going to need your W-2s. You're going to need your bank statements. The more detailed they are, the better. That's one tell I will tell you. These really quick, super fast calculators, they tend not to be that great. But overall, I strongly encourage you to complete calculators. And when you said that you had to complete calculators, I was thinking I didn't do a very good job with you, Anika, because I guess I just told you Davidson has amazing financial aid, and you knew. Yeah,
we were just a straight shot from Jalen and they had her scholarship. So John's next.
So you were covered. Because normally, if I'm working with a family and if they can't afford to pay the full price of the school, I strongly encourage everybody to complete the calculators, although some are better than others. And with my clients, I walk them through that process. But so they are imperfect, but they are worth doing. They're close enough to give you a ballpark. And something that's emerged in the last 4 years is something called My Intuition. So you'll see some schools have something called My Intuition in addition to a net price calculator. And this is this professor at Wellesley College, an economics professor, who realized that students and parents can answer usually just 6 questions. Now, if parents are split, not in the same household, it may be 12 questions, and it can give you a ballpark answer. And the reason why he did that is research found that here's the dilemma that people have with calculators, Anika. The best ones are the longer ones. The short ones are the ones that usually are not that great. Mm. But with the longer ones, financial aid offices could literally go in and they could see how many people started them and how many had completed them. And in some cases, only 20% of people were completing them. So they're like, wow, this is like defeating the purpose. Like, we're trying to have this tool here. We're trying to have this comprehensive calculator to be pretty accurate, but people aren't completing them. Mm-hmm. So then they came up, some schools you'll see this My Intuition, which the reason why you do that is you do this real quick, usually 6 questions, and then it'll give you a ballpark. And if you like the ballpark, then maybe you go to the next level and do the calculator. Mm. But choosing a college is about finding an academic match, a social match, an emotional match, and a financial match.
Yeah.
So the financial match is an important component of it, and a net price calculator is a really good tool. Now, one of the deficiencies that you'll find with all calculators, do you remember what I said in the chapter about that?
No.
So one of the deficiencies is that if a school has merit scholarships that are not based on test scores and grades.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, I didn't totally get that about the merit because not everybody gets merit. So.
Right. But this is what I'm saying. So let's say you fill out a net price calculator.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the school costs $65,000. And let's say you fill out the net price calculator and it says that you're going to have to pay 35. I'm just making up numbers. You know what I mean? I could say 5. I could say 60. I'm just making numbers up. Let's say it says you're going to have to pay 35. That's off of a need-based assessment. Okay, there are calculators that ask you for test scores and grades, and those are ones that give scholarships just strictly off of test scores and grades.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say it's a school that doesn't do that. Let's say they give their scholarships away holistically. Then it's going to tell you off of a need-based analysis, $35,000, but it doesn't mean you couldn't go and win a full tuition scholarship or even a full cost of attendance scholarship.
Right.
It has no ability to determine that because it's all about the numbers that you're punching in.
Mm-hmm.
So one mistake sometimes people make is they look at a calculator and they say, I can't afford that, so I'm not applying to that school. You still need to know that there could be merit scholarship money that could allow you to get a better award than the calculator. What the calculator will do is ballpark it, but it can't take that into consideration.
Okay.
Another thing to keep in mind is it's not guaranteed for 4 years. Each year you have to do the financial paperwork. And so as your income and assets change, then the calculator is going to change. So you need to know it's that current year. But it's absolutely worth doing. And for those of you who really listen astutely, back in episode 98, for the recommended resource, I gave my favorite place to go. But most people don't have memories like that. And not everybody listens to episode 98. So there's a couple ways you can find it. You can just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the resource tab, and then go down to click websites. And then you'll see under 98, you'll see something that'll say Department of Education's Net Price Calculator Center. And you can just click that link and it'll take you to my favorite place. It gives you all the net price calculators in one place, plus many, many other helpful links, including federal government websites and a bunch of information. So that's one way to do it. The other thing is you can just go straight to the link, which is collegecost.ed.gov /net-price. So either way, either go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the resources tab, and then go down and you'll find, click websites, because under resources we have books and websites. Click the websites tab, and then under 98, you'll see a link, and that'll take you right to it. Or you can go to collegecost.ed.gov /net. I always say it wrong. Is it dash or hyphen? I always confuse those two. To me, it's the line in the middle.
Let it be that.
Okay. Dash or hyphen. Sorry, English teachers out there, like my mother, who are rolling their eyes right now. Always confuse dash and hyphen. So either way can get you that. But that's my favorite place to go to do this. And the College Board has a good one as well. That's really good. That has a lot of schools on it. But start with the Department of Education's Net Price Calculator Center. It has it all there in one spot. Okay. Any other net price calculator questions?
Nope, I don't think so. I just you answered one of my questions was going to be about how long these things take. So you're saying basically it could be up to 20 minutes for the the more comprehensive ones.
Yeah, and some take under 5, but those are usually the lousy ones.
Yeah, but one thing you mentioned in there is about what you need to have ready when you go through these things. Like you mentioned that you need to have your tax records and your bank statements. Anything else beyond
W-2s.
that? Okay.
W-2s, and you need that for a student and the parents. Because remember, need-based aid looks at the income and assets of the student and the income and assets of the parents. Mm-hmm. So it's going to ask you precise questions, and you're going to need those tax returns and W-2s and bank statements.
That's probably why people don't finish it, because it's like, wait, I didn't know I need all that stuff. Too much work.
Yeah, but people can say it's too much work. But here's what I experience. People assume this college knows that I'm not loaded, so they know that
I can't pay the full sticker price. And then they get accepted, and then they freak out when they see what they have to pay.
Right.
And now their child's all emotionally bonded and connected to the school. And now they're having to tell little Johnny that we can't afford to send you, or they're taking out large Parent Plus loans. So I'd much rather you put 20 minutes in per school on the front side than go through that, because that is not fun, So, it's just worth it. It's like unquestionably worth it. I believe every parent that is not paying full sticker price, should complete the net price calculator to make sure a school's even affordable before you decide to even apply. So it's absolutely worth that time on the front end to do that. Does that make sense, Anika?
Yeah, it does. I'm just thinking about that 20%.
Well, but I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why only 20% of people do it, and this is my opinion, but I feel strongly about it. People assume, now, once again, I'm not talking about people that can pay everything. If you pay everything, then, you either skip this part of our conversation or you're intellectually curious about how it works for others. So you're listening, but you're not listening because it applies to you. So for people that need financial aid, that can't pay the full cost, people assume that a college is going to give them way more money than what most colleges do. So they don't think they need to do it because they're like, well, this college knows I'm not loaded, so I'm sure they're going to give me a great amount. And then that doesn't happen the majority of the time. So it's extremely important to know this. Like literally, to me, it's like buying a house I know you don't buy the house until you know the amount, but it would be like, you fly away the car. Let's say you're in New York, you want to move to Los Angeles, and you're looking for houses, and you fly all the way to Los Angeles, have the realtor show you everything, and at the last second, you find out what the price is. That's crazy. Yeah. Like, you spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of emotional energy that you invested that you could have saved, and then the realtor shows you houses for like $800,000, and your budget is like $400. That's crazy. Yeah. So that's why this is so essential. Like, it's kind of to me like a doctor saying, look, you can do a little bit of exercise and eat right, or you can come deal with cancer on the back end. Like, it's a lot better to do, some of the stuff on the front end and avoid that than, or maybe I should have used COVID-19. That would have been a better example. But anyway, I think, I told you, Nico, when you were looking at Davidson, that they were going to give you a sweetheart package. So you just trusted me. Yep. You just trusted me on the front end. But most of the time, they're one of the most generous colleges in the country.
Yeah.
But most of the time, people, they don't have someone sort of guiding them like that through the process.
Right.
Now, I'll say this. There's a whole lot more I want to say about net price calculators, and I'm itching to get it off my chest. But I'm not going to say it because these are all the questions that I'm going to ask Michael Runowitz, and I don't want to throw all the ammunition out now and then have people say, oh, you already covered that. But there's a lot of questions that I have for him that I'm not even going to bring up now. Okay. I'll tease one of them. When are they accurate and when are they not accurate, and how can people know? Those are the kind of things I'm going to ask him.
All right.
As well. So I'll just tease that out there so people come back for that interview.
Okay, Mike. Mike and Mark.
Mike and Mark.
We'll look forward to it.
Oh, I just had a flashback when I was like a little kid to this commercial like about Mikey and cereal or something. Hey, Mikey. Do you remember that? No? Yes?
Vaguely.
Yes, no?
Vaguely.
Vaguely?
Are you sure? Wait, Mikey's going to eat it all? Mike?
Something like that. Something. You know what? This is crazy. Let's get off this topic.
It's too late. It's too late.
I'm really, really off of college admissions right now.
Oh, good gracious.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right. It is bonus content continuation. What part are we in, Mark? We're talking about how COVID-19, this whole pandemic, has affected or impacted admissions for this year specifically. And we're in part 2, right?
Yeah, and I am doing a 3-part series on this. And what I said was last week I spent the entire time really debunking the myth out there that because lots of students took gap years, that it's going to be more competitive for the class of 2021 than the class of 2020. I talked about how the colleges took such a financial hit that they need to increase their enrollment or at least try to do it. And in order to try to increase their enrollment, they're going to admit more kids as a way of recouping money that they've lost. And so I focus entirely on that because that's just such a common misperception out there. So I wanted to just thoroughly debunk it. But I'm going to do something very different for part 2 and part 3. I'm going to go through 10 changes that I see coming to college admissions as a result of COVID-19 this week, and then 10 more next week. And I've already prepared everything. I've got this week's homework done or my research. But this week I'm just going to give 10. So what I want to do, Anika, we've done this before. I'll mention 3 and then let you comment on, one of the 3 that you want to comment on. And then I'll do another set of 3 and then I'll do 4 at the end. Like we'll go 3, 3, 4.
Okay.
So the first one, and our regular listeners know Rick Clark's a friend of the show, a friend of mine as well. He's been on the podcast twice, episode 50 and 100. I got him on the big ones, but he's the director of admission at Georgia Tech. And we were talking last week about COVID-19 and how it's going to impact college admissions. And one of the big things that he said, and I could not agree with him more, is that colleges are going to reduce their need-based aid and give more merit-based aid. So we've talked about this before. There's only 2 types of money. You either give money away because the family qualifies for it and they have a financial need, or you give money away because the student is a superstar and you want to incentivize them to come and not lose them to the competitors. So you give them a scholarship as an incentive so that they won't go to a competitor school. So that's the only 2 ways you can give money. But what happens is when a school is struggling financially, then they have to pay their bills. One simple way to address that, or at least partially address it, is to give less of your scholarship money away on the basis of need, or I use the term grants for need-based and scholarships for merit-based. I'm old school, but a lot of colleges sparse those terms and use them interchangeably. So you give more money away on the basis of merit because you're trying to incentivize people to come that can maybe pay oftentimes $40,000. Remember last week, Anika, when I was talking about there's going to be more acceptances, and you said for more acceptances of people that can pay or more acceptances in general, and I said, "Ooh, that's good. Can I hold that off for next week?"
And here we are.
And here we are. So that's going to be absolutely, unequivocally, there's no question in my mind. Look for schools to give away less need-based and more merit-based money because they need to get that tuition revenue. Second, we've talked about this a little bit already in past episodes with Dave, I know. More emphasis on early decision. Once again, early decision allows you to lock kids in and not have to compete for them. And so, and you don't know who in the world is coming, and you have multiple stakeholders that you have to please, all kinds of them. You got to keep every coach happy, the orchestra happy, the alumni office happy, the provost happy, the president happy. People are looking at your international students and your geographic distribution and Asian Americans and Black kids and Latinx kids, and then all the different college majors Professors want kids, so they want people interested in their discipline. It's like incredibly difficult to please all those stakeholders. And so if you can lock them in and you don't have to compete, most schools get about 1 out of every 5 kids that they admit. So rather than having to accept 5 kids to get 1, if you can accept 1 to get 1, makes your job a lot easier and allows you to please your stakeholders. So more emphasis on early decision. Now, keep in mind, only about 10% of all 4-year colleges offer it, but it tends to be offered at the more selective schools, especially the private schools. A third thing, very few schools who were test optional in 2021 are going to change in 2022. I talked about this with Sam Prouty, and he used that example. He said, remember that old rotary phone that we used to have in the phone booths? Now, you remember that, Anika.
That I do.
Go to a phone booth that had one of those dollar phones. He's like, that's what's going to happen to the test for those who are, that are going test optional now. Really? That's going to be a thing of the past.
That's interesting.
And so look for pretty much everybody that said we're doing a 1-year experiment to continue that experiment the following year. So any comment on the first 3 things? More need-based, more merit-based, less need-based, more emphasis on ED, and a continued growth of the test optional movement.
Yeah, that's interesting about the test optional, because it did sound like when that was first coming off as though schools were thinking about it really hard and this was a part of their plan anyway, but COVID just pushed them into it. But to hear that that's mostly going to go away, it just it's a stark difference than when it first came out, basically.
Yeah. Now, I am not saying the SAT or the ACT will become obsolete, but it is forever changed and will never be the same. And I said that right away, and I feel stronger than ever about that now. It is very difficult once you open up that Pandora's box, because one, students like it, the option to turn in their tests or not. Secondly, it increases your applications. And at a time when applications are at a premium because college attendance is down right now. And so remember, most schools are not these highly competitive schools that, that are taking like 1 in 10 kids or 1 in 5 kids. That is extremely rare. The average acceptance rate is 67%, 2 out of 3 kids get in. And the majority of schools did not fill their class. Even schools that are pretty reputable, like a school like George Washington, they were down 17% last year. So most schools need kids. So if they're, so when you're doing things that turn off students, that's not something you want to do. All right. So you ready for the next 3?
Yep. Next 3.
So I have a couple more and then still in the test score vein. Continued growth of the test blind movement. And remember the difference between test optional and test blind. Test optional says if you submit your scores, we'll consider them. Test blind says we're not even going to look at your scores.
Right.
In some cases, they've set their software up to block them out so they don't even see them, so that they can't even be biased by them.
Wow.
And so that movement is growing fast. Dave and I have done multiple, in the news talking about that in the last 6 months. And I've been shocked at how fast that movement has grown. I shared how I was meeting with 8 admission officers, mission directors with some other counselors. And they thought they were impressing everybody by saying, we're test optional this year. We're test optional. They all agreed, when they did their little spiels. And then the college counselors will say, well, are you test blind? And all of this is because, people feel like, well, how can it's confusing. You tell me you don't need it, but you'll tell me you'll consider it if I send it. That feels to me like you really want it.
Right.
And so some schools are just saying, you know what, we're just going to take that confusion away and let you know we won't even count it. So you don't have to deal with that angst and that pressure. And also, once again, it's a very attractive way to get more applications, and schools need applications. So it's a great way to get more applications. Growth of the test blind movement, number 4. Number 5, subject tests on life support. I mean, they literally might die out.
Well, it sounds like they were doing it anyway, weren't they?
Yeah, but here's how bad it was. Here's how bad it is now, Anika. So it got to the point where there are only 3 colleges in the country that required them. Okay? It was California Institute of Technology, MIT, and Harvey Mudd. Now, when you and I started this podcast, it was like 27, and then it went down. Remember, I was counting them down? I was like 18, 16, 12. So there are only 3 schools, okay? Now, 2 of those 3 schools, MIT and Harvey Mudd, not only are they not requiring them, they've gone test blind for subject tests saying, we will not even see them even if you try to submit them. And as recently as October of last year, and then again in November of last year, I had two, let's say, passionate conversations with MIT, trying to get them to consider not requiring this test. And my point was that kids in public school don't even know what this test is. So you say you want all this diverse talent, but you're not even getting them to consider you because they don't even know what the test. And at one point, one of the reps said to me, Mark, it's a mood issue. You can talk to your black and blue in the face. We're not changing. That was over being test optional. Fast forward 6 months later, and they won't even let you send them in.
Wow.
So that's how much that's changed. Now, one of the reasons why I think those two schools went test optional is because they wanted to prove to their families that, no, we're serious, as opposed to saying we're test optional when they were required before. And people are like, are you really optional? Really? I think you really want them. So anyway. And then the last thing is this is a non-test score thing, less admissions travel. So, admission officers didn't travel this year because of COVID-19. And two things happened when they didn't travel. One, they saved a lot of money on their budget. And two, they realized, wow, we can be pretty effective with all this virtual stuff, like much more effective than we ever imagined. Now, think of the pressure that schools are under. I was talking to an admission director recently at a school with a lot of money, and he was embellishing to make a point, but he was like, I could get in trouble if I order some pencils. Things are so tight around here. So when you can imagine when schools are under that kind of financial pressure, every time when you travel, I mean, you're talking airfare, rent a car, hotel, meals, be $1,500 for 2 days. So they're going to be cutting back on their budgets. And you know what? I'm going to throw number 7 out here because it's kind of related, and then you can comment, which is enhanced virtual offerings. So we've seen this already. I mean, I'm seeing schools offer up to 7, in some cases 8 different ways of virtually visiting. I mean, they'll have their standard information session and their guided tour. Then they'll have their open house. Then they'll have their student question and answer session. Then they'll have their department-based info session. So you want to do communications, we got specialized one just for you. And then they've got their interviews, and it just goes on and on and on. So enhanced virtual offerings. And one thing I'm really seeing is they take all of the virtual stuff that they do, and now it's all recorded so you can watch it on demand. I've seen a huge increase in that. So it's great that they have the virtual opportunity for you to come on at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. But what if you can't come at 2? Guess what? It's recorded. Log in and watch the recording. Okay. What are your questions, thoughts, comments on that? So just to review, these points were growth of the test blind movement, subject test on life support, less admissions travel, and enhanced virtual offerings.
No, it all makes sense. And I just wonder with the admissions officers, I mean, they didn't travel, but were they still conducting their business like everyone else virtually? Like, were they doing like little private visits with folks or students? Like
Zoom away.
Yeah. So they were still doing business just virtually.
Correct.
Literally. Okay.
Yeah. So they did. So like, I mean, I was a part of a lot of these, and I got so many different emails from them saying, can you pull together a group of your students? And I'd love to do a virtual information session. Okay. So everything was just done virtually. So they still did virtual information sessions by school. They did them by city. They did that. They did way, you know what? I almost gave away number 9. It almost slipped out ahead of time.
All right. Well, give us the next 3.
Okay. So the last 3 for today. Schools are very, very concerned with summer melt. And Dave and I talked about summer melt in our in the news. And, Anika, you remember we talked about that before and with you, like melting like a popsicle, right? Like students enroll, they paid the deposit, and they don't show up.
Right.
So colleges are greatly concerned with summer melt. So what you're going to see is a real increase in their number of touches. So right now, there's a number of programs out there that people are studying because some schools have done a really, really good job of having very little summer melt. And so you're seeing workshops, seminars, all kinds of things on how to reduce summer melt. And they just can't afford to lose students. I mean, these are students that literally have enrolled, signed up, paid a deposit, and they don't show up. And so one of the things that's been very successful is these text-based programs that have have students getting text messages throughout the summer with instructions like go into your portal and sign up for your classes, sign up for orientation. It's required. We're missing this from your file, this kind of thing. And some of them are automated. Some of them are more personal, but that's proven to be an incredibly effective way to reduce summer melt is having these, increased text messages to students throughout the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So look for lots of these more sophisticated ways, phone calls as well. Look for that. And then number 9, this was the one that I almost slipped out when you were asking me, what do they do? The return of the interview. So there's a lot more interviews that are happening from admissions officers. Normally most interviews are done by alumni or by, senior fellows or senior students. But I've seen way more admission interviews by admission officers this year. That's a big part of what I do with my students is prep them for the interview.
Okay.
And so I'm very much aware of I'm like, that school's doing interviews this year? That school? Wow, I can't believe how many schools are doing interviews that weren't doing them in the past. And then, the students, sign up for time for me to do interview prep with them. And I always ask them, is this with a senior, a student, or is it with an alumni, or is it with an admission officer? And they'll say, I don't know. I say, check the email. It's almost always in the email. And they'll go back and read the email. And I'm hearing way, way, way more with actual admission officers than before. So, they have more time. They're not traveling. They're not on the road. And plus, most of these schools are closed down. They're not doing visits.
Right.
So they have more time. Return of the interview. And then the last one, more sophisticated use of predictive analytics. So this is what we talked about before, trying to assess who's coming, who's serious about us, who's not serious about us, using real sophisticated logarithms through Slate, tracking your online behavior and looking at student engagement in a lot of different ways and using that to figure out who's serious about us and who's not. That just continues to get to a whole deeper level of sophistication. Mm-hmm. So any comments, questions, thoughts on the last 4, Nico, which were, the last 3. Mm-hmm. More touches over the summer, more sort of systematic, comprehensive programs to reduce student melt, the return of the interview, and more sophisticated use of predictive analytics and engagement scoring to try to figure out who's coming and who's not coming and who's serious about us and who's not serious about us.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, look at COVID making us all more efficient because we should be doing those things anyway. Beyond the pandemic, we should have been sending kids text messages all summer long. Make sure you do A, B, C, D and show up on August 15th. Thank you. Yeah.
You're really right, because not only should a lot of those things have been happening, but all of these virtual things that the schools are doing now, admission officer after admission officer says, what were we doing? Why were we not doing these things before?
Right, exactly.
Because they level the playing field. The old model assumed you had the resources to be able to travel and visit the school. Well, that didn't apply. It doesn't apply to a lot of kids, and so this does level the playing field. But the flip side of it is, in the past, if you never visited a school, there are a lot of colleges that would say, you know what, might have been a resource issue, so let's not hold it against the kid.
Yeah.
Now they can say, you couldn't log into your computer and attend an information session,
Yep.
You couldn't attend an open house. You couldn't do any of that stuff.
Whoops.
So you're not serious about us, and we won't be serious about you. Don't get me wrong. A lot of schools don't use that stuff at all, especially public schools. I don't want to imply every school does it, but more schools use this than you think, especially private schools.
All righty.
Can you take 10 more next week, Anika? Because I've already done my homework. To tell you the truth, all I did is sit back and think. Like, I just sat back and thought, like a meditative, like I'm a monk in a Buddhist monastery or something. That's all I did. I just sat back and racked my brain and started saying, what are all the changes? And then I just started flowing and I wrote them down.
Oh, my goodness. You got a lot of stuff up there, Mark. You sure to pull something out of there.
Well, the podcast lets me unload it every week, so it gets it out. Well, I'll have 10 more for you guys next week in the final part. And then I will say this. I can't wait to go back to questions from a listener because I don't know. I love that. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast. And we've had some great questions that people have sent in. By the way, send your questions in to questions@yourcollegebounkid.com because starting after next week, I'm going back to like episodes 151, 52, 53, 54 will be questions from a listener. And every 5th week, I'll do bonus content.
Back to usual.
Back to normal. Something has to go back to normal.
Right.
This COVID world. But by the way, Anika, have you been following the vaccine news?
Kind of, sort of. I know somebody's trying to get something approved to start administering by December 21st.
So I listened to I've really been getting interested in this. There's 3 major drugs out and a 4th major one now that are showing over 90% reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And the clear consensus is that by June, anybody who wants a vaccine should be able to get one. And all indications are that it should be pretty normal next year in school in terms of look, I know it's going to take us a while to get through this because you're going to have some people that don't. Not everybody's going to take the vaccine and, you know what I mean? You're still going to have issues.
Right.
I don't want to be naive about that. And there are going to be some people that take the vaccine and it's not foolproof. But all indications are to me that we should be back to business as usual for the fall for the seniors in high school. I think they're going to have a very traditional college experience where they don't have to, fixate on social distancing and mask wearing and all of that. It's going to be interesting to see if colleges require vaccines, and there's going to be whole legal battles that are going to emerge. You can't require me. I mean, that's going to be the next battle to fight. Right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, but I'll have to do some in the news conversations on that. But Anika, get some sleep. I didn't tell you listeners this, but as soon as I logged into with Anika, she's just this big yawn. Big yawn. I'm like, oh, and we are recording at 10:12, which is past her bedtime.
Way past my bedtime.
And then she starts yawning so hard she's crying. And I was like, are you okay, Anika? And she said, no, I yawned so hard it made me cry.
It did.
So you can go yawn in your bed under the covers and get some sleep.
Under the bed. Here I come.
See you next week.
See ya.
Okay, friends, you've heard Dr. Rouff for the last couple weeks where she's been talking about careers in mental health therapy. We switch gears now and go in a really different direction. She opens up talking about how we met. Then we transition and talk about how she became interested in the college admission process. And she talks about her experience getting some additional training in California. Then we transition and talk about mental health impediments that impair peak performance. Now, this can impair your performance in the actual college admission process or just doing well in school itself. In part 1 of what would be a 2-part interview, Lisa will talk about 5 of these mental health concerns that impede peak performance on the part of a student. And then in the final part, she'll finish up with the last 2. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Well, that's fascinating, Lisa. This is great. Now I want to switch gears. I was going to talk about how we met, but I'm going to let you do that. Why don't you talk about how we met, and I'll probably throw in a few comments, annotate a little bit to what you say, and throw in a few details.
Okay. Well, a few years ago, I started getting really interested in the college application process when I started helping my nephew write his essays for his college applications. I started talking to him a lot about his list, about what schools he felt he wanted to apply to. And I just was so fascinated by all of the choices that he had and the college application process. So I started reading everything that I could about it. And then I decided to look into podcasts about college application process. And that's how I found this fantastic podcast. And I started listening to it, and it just was revelatory to me, because I think we can all agree, all the listeners, that Mark knows pretty much everything there is to know about the college application process.
No, that's not true.
And shares that knowledge with us all for free. And I really have appreciated all that I've learned just from listening to the podcast. So as I went further in my process, I decided that I was really interested in becoming a college consultant myself, because I realized watching my nephew that his list wasn't very good. He was applying to all of these incredibly selective schools, and he is an excellent student and a brilliant person, but he did not realize how competitive it was. And he didn't have any other sort of maybe slightly less selective, but fantastic schools that he was applying to that would have been great fits for him. And he sort of ended up going someplace he applied to at the last minute, and it's all worked out. But I felt with some better guidance, he could have had a better experience. And I thought that that might be something that I would like to help other people with. as I thought more about it, I realized that with my clinical skills, I could help people identify what was important to them about choosing a college. And then I needed to get more of the college counseling skills. That's when I applied to do the Independent Educational Consultant Program, which is a certificate program at U of C Irvine. So during that time, I wanted to talk to you about my career path going forward. And also my oldest daughter was applying to college at the time. And so I scheduled a couple of sessions with you, which were fantastic. And that is how we met.
Yeah. And what happened was Lisa and I just continued to keep in touch with each other. And what she didn't know is in the back of my mind, I was thinking that I'm having a lot of growth. I don't think I can handle the growth that I'm experiencing at the time. And I'm going to be looking for someone to come on and join my team because I'm sleeping not that many hours these days. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I really, really like the combination of the skill set that you have, because I notice in counseling, there are a lot of mental impediments that keep people from being A+ performers. So let's talk a little bit about that right now. Let's talk about some of the mental health impediments that are really common, really frequent, in the college admission process, and just sort of what some of your thoughts are for parents that have a child that may be struggling with some of these things. So let's start with one I encounter on a routine basis, which is, test anxiety related to the test score, but just anxiety in general.
Right.
What's your advice to the parent that's listening that says, yeah, that's my child. I've got a child that struggles with anxiety in general or test anxiety?
Well, I think that anxiety and test anxiety are very common problems. And I think with the increasing pressure and focus on test scores on high school students right now, that has increased. But the good news is it's a treatable problem. And by learning and practicing some relaxation and concentration techniques, most students who experience test anxiety can improve their testing experience in a relatively short amount of time. And I really would recommend anyone with test anxiety to take the time now to learn some of these skills, because life is a test. There are lots of tests in life, lots of situations that are going to make you anxious. And so it's time well spent as a young person that's really going to pay off for the rest of your life. That's
helpful. Another thing that I don't know if this is more common now or if it's just being diagnosed now, but ADD and ADHD. At one time there was a stigma, so maybe there's no more now than there ever was before, but it was incognito before and just didn't go either diagnosed or recognized or discussed or whatever, but very, very common for students to struggle with ADD, ADHD. And I know you have a lot of experience in this area. What's your advice for the parent who's got a child with ADD or ADHD?
Right. Well, first I'm going to say to that parent, congratulations, because most children, most adults that I work with who have ADHD, they are the most brilliant, most creative, smartest people that I know. ADD and ADHD, it's a neurobiological disorder, and some people look at it as a developmental delay. And I don't think it was understood as that many years ago. It was understood more as a conduct disorder or behavior disorder. But now we've done a lot of studies on the brain, and we know it's a neurobiological disorder. And it's a neurological process that isn't typical. And there are advantages to that. If you think of Leonardo da Vinci, he certainly had ADD. He couldn't finish anything. He kept flitting from thing to thing. But despite that, he was one of the most creative, artistic, and brilliant human beings that our species has ever seen. So part of the problem now is that our society has become increasingly structured, and our educational system has become increasingly structured. And so kids who have this neuro-non-typical way of thinking can't always succeed in this system. So if they had been in a more free-form system, their advantages would show themselves more quickly. Now, the symptoms of ADD vary from person to person, and in particular between boys and girls. Difficulty maintaining focused attention to a non-desirable task is a hallmark of this disorder. Many people think of ADD as a disorder of inhibition, meaning that someone cannot inhibit their response. So, for example, One child might be able to inhibit their response to look out the window when a bird flies by while the teacher is talking, whereas someone with ADHD might not neurologically be able to inhibit their response when something more interesting like the bird comes along, and their focus will shift to that. So some kids with ADD have more of the hyperactive type, so you'll see the fidgeting, the shifting, and some of the behavioral problems, but other individuals, particularly girls, don't present in this way. And I feel this is why girls are often undiagnosed, and they're mainly struggling with difficulties attending, and that's invisible to their teachers. And that's why they're not getting the help that they need.
Wow, that was deep.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, the recommended resource for episode 149 is a good one. And it is collegeinsights.roadtocollege.com. Now, when you go to this website, you'll see a search bar. Put in any college at all that you're interested in, and you will see volumes of statistical information, 30 to 50 different statistical things. Here are a few of the things you'll find right away. Number of undergrads, faculty-student ratio, gender breakdown, sophomore retention rate, four-year grad rate, average high school GPA, average ACT, SAT, overall admit rate, ED admit rate, EA admit rate, RD admit rate, percentage of the class filled by ED, admission yield, percentage of need met, average financial aid award for freshmen, freshmen with no financial need who get merit, what percentage of those people apply, average loan debt, 30 to 40 different categories. I just read a few for you, and there are many, many others. But to be honest, there are many places where you can get all the information that I shared with you just now. This is just one of the many websites. One of the things I like about this website, it does have links that will direct you to all the merit scholarships that the school offers. Now let's get to what really makes this website special. And it is, they have done something I haven't seen anywhere else. They have crowdsourced offers. So you can see the merit awards and the need-based awards that other students have gotten. You can see it for this year. You can also go back and see it for the previous year. And so that's what makes this website really special. And so, for example, if you go in and look, you'll see student, now this is self-reported, but they'll have their expected family contribution, the state they're from, their GPA, their test scores, how they applied, regular, rolling, EA, ED, ED2. And then they have this both for need-based awards and merit-based awards. So in the need-based section, it'll say what their need-based award was, and it'll say whether the reward was renewable or not. And once again, for merit scholarships, you can see all of this information. So it's a good way to look and find out if somebody has your GPA, your test scores, what kind of aid award did they get. And over time, they just get more and more and more entries, making it even more valuable. Definitely worth checking out this website. Strongly recommended, collegeinsights.roadtocollege.com, and that 2 is the number 2. Now return to my interview with Lisa Rouff. So another thing that I encounter a lot, and this one I'm going to ask you to explain because it may not be as familiar to our listeners as some of the ones that we've discussed already. I think people are pretty familiar with ADD, ADHD, test anxiety, or at least they've heard of it. This one they may not have, but it's executive functioning challenges. Major impediment to people excelling in school. And obviously, if you're not excelling in school, then it hinders your ability to excel in the college admission process. So why don't you share with all of us what executive functioning is and what advice you have for someone that may have some challenges with executive functioning?
Sure. Executive functioning skills are the skills that allow us to plan, concentrate, follow directions, and manage many tasks simultaneously. Some people have very innately highly functioning executive functioning skills, but that's not true for everyone. Many people with attention deficit disorder have difficulty with executive functioning skills. It's one of the major symptoms of that disorder. But I think you have to also keep in mind that executive functioning skills can be impaired by a lot of different factors. So if someone is very anxious, if someone is depressed, if they have some other learning differences, let's say they have a brain injury, all of these things can diminish a person's executive functioning skills. Executive functioning skills can be learned. And I think that's the key point here is that if you don't have good executive functioning skills, if you're motivated, you can learn to have good executive functioning skills. And it's really just about developing habits, organized habits that you can learn, that someone can teach you, and that can really improve your functioning as a whole.
Wow, that's great stuff. So, the more I go down the list, I realize, wow, there are a lot of challenges out here mentally. There really are.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about another one, and definitely one I see a lot, especially with high-performing kids. I see this all the time, and that's perfectionism. They have a 34 or a 35 in the ACT, and they just want to keep taking it to get a 36. Right. They've written a really good essay, and they just can't stop tinkering with it over and over and over again. They encounter high levels of stress if they don't get, close to perfect on a test or a quiz. So I'm talking about perfectionism. And so what are your thoughts on this? What's your advice to the parent that's got a child that struggles with perfectionism?
To be honest, I blame our culture for a lot of the perfectionism that you're seeing. In today's world, kids aren't allowed just to be kids and to make mistakes. The pressure on students to get into what they perceive as the best college, whether it's from their parents or from their peers, it makes them feel like they can never fail. The thing is, though, that we know that we learn the most from our failures. And in some ways, failures are the number one variable that leads to long-lasting success because we learn from mistakes more quickly than we do from our successes. I once read a study about professors or researchers in university settings, and they looked at people who had early career failures versus people who hadn't, and they looked at them longitudinally. Now, guess which group was ultimately more successful? It was the people who had failed early on. They learned from that, they retooled, and I don't feel like we're letting kids do that nowadays. So I think the most advice I can give for parents is to be understanding that your child is developing, they're exploring the world. Adolescents are notoriously variable in their functioning. One day they're great, the next day they're terrible, and it goes back and forth like that for a while. And to be accepting of the fact that that's where they are emotionally, developmentally, neurobiologically, and to try to help the student take that pressure off of themselves.
I just had a flashback. I know you've heard every podcast episode, Lisa, so you probably remember this, but there was a time when I got just so concerned with the mental health challenges that students are encountering that for 10 weeks in a row, our recommended resource was a mental health book. And one that I love so much is Enough as She Is.
Yes, that's a phenomenal book.
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't that a great book?
It's a fantastic book. Every parent of a girl, or every parent, period, should read that book.
Yeah. It deals with so much of these things we're talking about. So let's talk about another one. Another one meaning another mental health challenge that students are encountering, and our culture also probably plays a big role with this, and that's depression. What are your thoughts on that? And what can you share with a parent that's got a child that struggles with depression?
Yeah, along with perfectionism and anxiety, depression is increasingly common today among high school and college students. And again, I believe that for many, their situation is what we call a depressogenic situation. The main thing I would say to parents is it's very important to be on the lookout for signs of depression on your child and to be active in treating that depression as soon as possible. Depression is very treatable. There are medications and therapies that can help people feel a lot better and regain their functioning in a relatively short period of time. And a young person is in high school or college is going through such a critical period, and depression can pull them out of a lot of opportunities that they might otherwise have the energy to participate in. So we want those kids applying for the internship. We want them joining that club. We want them applying for that job. And depressed people have a hard time doing that. So it's really important to be on the lookout for signs and symptoms of depression and to encourage your child to get treatment as soon as possible.
Yeah, because it can lead to suicide or suicidal thoughts. I work with students and have those thoughts and go through those struggles, and that's what I'm like, Lisa.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people still don't understand mental health issues in their own children. And I myself, as a parent, despite my training, have been victim of this. You don't see your own, you only know your own children. You don't really know the intimate emotional details of other children. You don't necessarily see, hey, that's a red flag. That's a problem. It just seems kind of, that's just how this person is. But in the case of depression, that's really not how that person is. And so it's important to try to be open-minded to that and to intervene and to get treatment as soon as you can.
Next week in the news, how much will Biden be able to do? The battle for control of the Senate appears headed for 2 runoff elections in Georgia with ramifications for higher education. That is an article by Kerry Murakami in Inside Higher Education. Mark and Anika will discuss Tell me 18 reasons why a 529 plan is the best college savings vehicle. Our bonus content will be an additional 10 ways of how COVID is changing college admissions this year. And the interview is part 2 with Dr. Lisa Rouff on 7 mental health challenges that students face and how to deal with them. And our college spotlight will be, drumroll please, the University of Houston.
Boy, it's been a while since I've done a spotlight. I was ready to roll with University of Houston, but instead, Dave, give us an update on COVID and all these vaccines. You're the doc on our staff. What should we expect? The listeners hearing about all this information about these vaccines, when do you think the average person will find they're available? And do you recommend that the public trust, what they're hearing when they say they're free to go ahead and try them?
Yes. Well, I think you should expect a staged rollout. I think by all indications, there will be some vaccines being made available to healthcare providers sometime, maybe December, but most likely in January, that they shall then roll them out to the more susceptible populations in the next 2 or 3 months. But realistically, widespread availability of vaccine probably won't occur until late spring, early summer. There's going to be quite a variety available as to whether they're going to be the specific ones that require cold storage and 2 separate dosings or a single dosing. I'm not sure, but I would recommend that people take the first one that's available to them. And I would feel very confident taking these vaccines. I think that they've been excellently researched. These are great companies doing them. And more importantly, almost all the companies are finding similar results. There are some side effects. They tend to be minor, but most of them are reporting efficacies of the vaccine in the 90 plus, 95% sometimes range. And an immune response that's probably going to be measured in, if not extended months, possibly even several years. So very, very positive things all around on the vaccine. All we have to do is get through these next 3 or 4 months, and that is going to be the big challenge.
So listen, it's December now. You're a healthcare professional. Does this mean you could be getting the vaccine like in the next 4 weeks?
I think so. I think it's probably not. The reality is, I'm in Chicago. I can't even get tested in Chicago, and I'm a doctor. So, there's a lot of...
You need to take that COVID assignment again in North Jersey, and they'll put you at the front of the list.
Possibly. But, there's things that you don't even consider. I mean, one of the things is that there's a shortage of dry ice. How often do you really need dry ice? I mean, for parties and so forth. But all of a sudden, you're talking about transporting hundreds and millions of doses of the vaccine, and it has to be in dry ice packed containers. And so where's all the dry ice coming from? So, I mean, that's just an illustration of how there's never been a vaccine program that's involved the creation and the testing and the rollout and the massive distribution. We've never had it on this scale ever. And it's global. So huge logistical challenges, but we'll get to it. But no, I still think that I'll be surprised if I get access to an actual vaccine before January or February.
All right, Doc. Well, keep us posted.
Not a problem. But happy days are coming, guys. So just hang in there.
Keep your mask we can on. See the end in sight. Yeah. End is in sight.
It maybe truly is.
Maybe the class of 2021 can have a normal fall, experience, residential experience on campus.
I'm hoping, because I know that my wife wants to get the dogs out of my daughter's bedroom because they're all too cozy. I mean, we used to have these wonderful guard dogs that if anybody came near the house, they'd be right there and barking. But now, after sleeping in my daughter's room for the last 6 months, nobody gets up before noon.
Well, maybe you can get a visit to the Virgin Islands now from your wife and your daughter instead of boycotting over COVID.
I hope so, man.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.